Much better. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Today I'm going to talk about two Dog-Man encounters that never supposed to come out. This happened 8 hours ago. An Apache Trail cleared his head. This is where it happened to him. Cleared out his mirrors fell apart. He came back 17 pounds lighter with a tumor in his hand and the doctors can't explain. The memory of something standing on the trail that let him walk away. Game warrant Carter has spent 19 years documented while the state kept closing it as bear attacks. But you gotta understand some people. Of course, game wardens and police officers are going to tell you not this ain't true because they don't want you to know the truth because it hurts their job, it hurts where they're staying at and everything, plus all the paperwork. So let's go ahead and get to the video, shall we?
And any cryptids that might be lurking in the shadows, listening a little too closely, welcome. Tonight, we're stepping beyond the edge of the known, into that quiet space where reality begins to blur. I've got not one, but two chilling Dogman encounters sent in, waiting to be told. So go ahead, pour yourself something strong, grab a snack, and settle in by the fire. Let the outside world fade away. From here on out, you're in my hands. Now, let me guide you into the unknown. Cal Pruitt isn't someone who believes in monsters, and he makes that clear from the start. He went out on the Appalachian Trail trying to clear his head after his life fell apart, expecting nothing more than a long, quiet hike. What he found out there ended up sticking with him in a way he still can't fully explain. Now let's dive into this encounter, shall we? My name is Cal Pruitt, and I want to be clear about one thing before I say anything else. I am not the kind of person who believes in monsters. I want to be clear about that because everything that follows is going to sound like exactly the kind of story told by exactly that kind of person. And I know how it reads. I know how I would have read it 18 months ago, before I spent 11 days on the Appalachian Trail and came back with 17 fewer pounds on my body, a tremor in my left hand that the neurologist at Vanderbilt calls idiopathic, and my therapist calls psychosomatic, and which I call the only honest thing left in my life, and a very specific and detailed knowledge of what the inside of something's home smells like when that something has been dragging dead things into it for a very long time. But I am getting ahead of myself. My wife Karen left me in February. I don't blame her. I was not a good husband, not because I was cruel or unfaithful, but because I was absent in the way that is somehow worse than cruelty or infidelity, present in body, gone in every way that mattered. I would sit across the dinner table from her and answer her questions, and pass the salt and refill my water glass, and the whole time I would be somewhere else entirely, living in my head in the way I had always lived, since I was a boy getting through school by thinking about something else, since I was 22, and getting through my first real job by thinking about something else, since I was 34, and getting through my marriage by thinking about something else. Karen finally said to me, "I feel like I'm married to a ghost, Cal." I told her that wasn't fair. She said, "I know," and left. The divorce was finalized in April. In May, my therapist, a small patient woman named Dr. Levin, who keeps a bowl of wrapped butterscotch candies on her desk that I have never once seen her eat, suggested I try something physical, something that would put me back in my body. She meant yoga or swimming or maybe just a walk around the neighborhood each evening, something modest and sustainable. Instead, I drove to Damascus, Virginia, strapped on a pack I had borrowed from my neighbor Gary, and started north on the AT with 11 days of food and the vague, poorly articulated idea that the mountains would fix whatever was wrong with me. I had hiked before, not extensively, but enough to know the basics, enough not to be dangerous.
Find your perfect tax expert, whatever your tax situation might be. Hand off your taxes to an expert who gets you with TurboTax Expert Full Service.
I'm really trying to improve my flexibility this year, so I asked ChatGPT to help me come up with a few stretches I can do every day. They're super easy to incorporate before or after a workout or before bed, and it only takes me 10 minutes.
I knew about leave no trace and water filtration and blister prevention and the way the weather comes fast on ridgelines. What I did not know, what no one had told me, what I had not read in any of the 3 guidebooks I skimmed in the 2 weeks before I left, was that 11 days alone in the wilderness is a very long time to spend inside your own head. What I did not know was that the silence of those mountains is not the peaceful silence of a Sunday morning, or the comfortable silence of a long marriage in its good years. It presses against you. It gets into you. And after enough days of it, you start to notice things you would not otherwise notice. The way you notice a sound in a quiet house that you would never hear over the noise of ordinary life. I noticed the smell on day 6. I was moving through a section of trail in the highlands of Virginia, in a stretch of forest so dense the canopy closed out most of the afternoon light, and the path moved through a green and grey dimness that felt more like dusk than 3 in the afternoon. I had not seen another hiker in 2 days. The trail shelter I had planned to reach by nightfall was still 4 miles out, which was fine. I was making good time. My blister had calmed down, and I was in the rhythm that comes when the pack stops feeling like punishment and starts feeling like part of your body. The smell stopped me dead on the trail. It was organic and deep and large, the way the smell of a zoo is not any one animal, but the cumulative fact of many large animals in an enclosed space. Dense animal musk, underlaid with something rotten, something that had been dead long enough to go past the sharp stage and into something sweeter and worse. I stood on the trail with my poles planted and breathed through my nose and tried to identify it, and could not, except to note that it was coming from downslope to my left, from a hollow where the ground dropped away from the trail and the trees grew thicker, and the undergrowth was a wall of rhododendron so dense it was essentially a solid object. I should have kept walking. The smell communicated, on some level below language, that something large and wrong was nearby. My body knew it, a tightening in my chest, a prickling at the back of my neck, the fine hairs on my forearms rising under my jacket sleeve. My body was telling me to keep walking. I went down slope into the rhododendron. I don't know why. If you want a clean explanation, I cannot give you one. The best I can do is tell you that after 6 days alone in those mountains, I had gotten profoundly bored of my own fear. I had spent the better part of 3 years being afraid of things. Afraid of losing Karen. Afraid of losing my job. Afraid of what I was becoming or had already become. And I had done nothing about any of it. The smell was a concrete thing. A real thing. And in 6 days of trail I had seen no bear, no elk, nothing larger than a white-tailed deer. I told myself I was being rational. The rhododendron closed over me immediately, and I was in a different world. The branches were chest-high and interlocking, and I had to push through them with my arms, and duck under the thicker ones, my pack catching and scraping. The ground was soft under my boots in a way that was different from the trail, not soft from moisture, but soft from depth, from years of accumulated duff, so thick it'd give to it like a mattress. The smell intensified with every step. I was breathing through my mouth. I came through the rhododendron into a space that opened up under the tree canopy, a hollow, roughly circular, maybe 40 feet across, floored in that deep duff and bounded on 3 sides by the rhododendron, and on the 4th by a granite outcropping that rose in a rough stair-step formation up the hillside to where the trail ran above. The outcropping had at its base an overhang. Not a cave exactly. The ceiling was low, maybe 4 feet, and it ran back into the rock maybe 12 or 15 feet, but it was sheltered and dry, and the floor of it was that same impacted duff, worn down the way a dog wears down its bed over years of returning to the same spot. I stood at the edge of the hollow and looked at that overhang, and understood immediately, and with total clarity, that something lived there. The bones were what made it certain. They were scattered across the floor of the hollow in no particular arrangement, the careless accumulation of many meals over a long period of time. Deer, mostly. I could identify those from the leg bones and the distinctive shape of the skulls, 2 of which were intact enough to be recognizable.
Did you know that our food system is basically designed to be wasteful? We grow so much food in the US that goes to waste. That's one of the big reasons why I started Misfits Market. I got the idea when I was visiting an apple orchard. I saw all these apples that weren't going to get eaten. On farms, fruits and vegetables get tossed for so many different reasons. When they have a funny shape, when they're too big or too small, or even when they have just too many to sell. And it's mostly because traditional grocery stores don't want to buy these products. They only want the best looking stuff. And it's not just fresh produce. It's the parts of the salmon that just aren't as popular. It's cookies when they get new branding or new packaging. It's pasta noodles when they get packaged in the wrong box. At Misfits Market, we buy all that perfectly good food. And we pass on savings to our customers. We've rescued nearly 200 million pounds of high quality food, and we're just getting started. Go to misfitsmarket.com to start saving money by saving food.
The next level of Galaxy is here. Tune in to Galaxy Live for an exclusive sneak peek and offer.
But there were other bones, longer and more slender than deer bone, and I looked at them, and then looked away, and did not look at them again. There was a boot, a single hiking boot with ankle support, and a Vibram sole, size 10 or 11, still laced, lying on its side near the base of the overhang with the top crushed flat, as if something heavy had stepped on it. There was no foot in it. There was no other boot. Fur was everywhere. Long, coarse strands of it, dark grey and brown, snagged on every branch at the edge of the hollow, caught in the bark of the trees, lying in dense mats across the duff. I picked up a strand and held it between my fingers, thick as a guitar string, as long as my forearm, and it smelled of that same deep musk that had stopped me on the trail above. I should have left. I should have scrambled back up through the rhododendron and gotten on the trail and walked the 4 miles to the shelter and found a cell signal and called someone. I knew this. I was not panicking. I was standing in that hollow being completely rational and making the active decision not to leave. What I did instead was take off my pack and sit down with my back against a tree at the far edge of the hollow from the overhang and get out my notebook and start writing down everything I observed. I am a technical writer by trade. I document things for a living. I was doing what I know how to do. The overhang faced roughly southeast. The floor of it was shaped in a rough oval, the long axis running about 8 feet. At the back, the duff was deeper and compressed into a depression, a body-shaped indentation, the long trough of something that had slept in one position so many times the earth had accepted the shape of it. The depression was enormous. I looked at it and made myself stay with it. The width across the shoulders, the length from the crown of the head to where the heels would have rested. And when I was done making my measurements, I wrote them in my notebook and sat back against the tree and stared at what I had written for a while. The bones at the periphery had been chewed, comprehensively worked, the way a dog will spend an afternoon on a knuckle bone until there is nothing left worth having, and then worry it further out of habit. The larger leg bones had been chewed down to stubs. Some had been cracked after, the break pattern a jagged blowout, the force applied from the sides by something that could generate that kind of pressure in its jaw. I sat there for a long time. The light in the hollow was shifting, going amber, and I realized it was later than I thought. I started to pack my notebook away. That was when I heard it. Movement below me, deeper in the hollow, below the rhododendron on the downslope side, heavy and deliberate, the purposeful, unhurried movement of something that does not think of itself as prey. And under the movement, underneath it, breathing. A low, rhythmic sound, the inhale and exhale of a chest much larger than mine, slow enough that each breath was an event. I did not move. My body made that decision before my brain was consulted. The rhododendron on the downslope side of the hollow shook once, hard, the branches rattling, and then went still. The breathing continued. Whatever was down there was aware of me. I understood that with total certainty. And it was not moving, because it had not yet decided to move. I closed my eyes. I am not a religious person. I was raised Methodist in a vague, attenuated way, the kind of upbringing that leaves you with a general familiarity with the relevant stories and a complete absence of any felt belief. I have not prayed since I was 12 years old. I prayed then, with the focused sincerity of a man who has run out of alternatives, which is the only kind of prayer that has any authenticity to it. The rhododendron shook again, this time on the upslope side, to my left, between me and the trail. Something was moving around the perimeter of the hollow, large enough to move through that dense rhododendron, with only the sound of branches, rather than the crashing noise a human body would have made. Moving toward the opening I had come through, moving toward the trail, then quiet. I sat against that tree for what I believe was 45 minutes. When I was reasonably sure nothing was moving in the hollow, I stood up, put on my pack with hands that were not entirely steady, and pushed back through the rhododendron and up to the trail. The trail was empty in both directions. The light was fully amber now, the shadows long and the sky above the canopy going from blue to the first pale stages of gray. I turned north and walked. I maintained a pace that was not quite running, something determined by the part of my nervous system that operates below conscious instruction.
You, just you, building your app. On base 44. Describe it. And it's real. One thought leads to more thoughts. Layer by layer, taking shape. When you need your tools, bring them in. They just click. Okay, kick it up a notch. Create something smarter, something powerful. Style counts, so give it your touch. Big or small. Next idea hits at 2 a.m. Of course it does. Keep building. Ask yourself, wait, I built this? Damn right. Base 44. Build it your way.
I made 4 miles in just over an hour and reached the shelter well after dark. There was another hiker at the shelter, a retired schoolteacher from Knoxville named Gerald, 60-ish, with a gray beard and a careful, methodical way of doing everything, boiling his water, hanging his food bag, setting out his sleeping pad, that I found profoundly comforting. I ate a cold dinner and told Gerald I had made good time today, and he told me the weather was supposed to turn tomorrow, and I said that was good to know. And I lay in my sleeping bag and stared at the roof of the shelter for a long time before I slept. I should have left the trail in the morning. Gerald was heading south and I should have gone with him. Back to Damascus, back to my car, back to Nashville and Dr. Levin and the butterscotch candies and the slow work of becoming a person again. I had found bones that were not all animal bones. I had found a boot. I had found evidence that something large and unidentified was denning in a hollow 60 feet below the Appalachian Trail in Highland County, Virginia, and people needed to know that. Instead, I went back. I have thought about this a great deal in the 18 months since. The best I can say is this. I needed to know. I have always needed to know. It is the thing that has made me good at my job and bad at being a person. This compulsion to document, to understand, To have the complete picture regardless of what the complete picture costs. Karen